Hi, this is Brad Linder with Liliputing, and this is the Huawei MateBook X Pro, which is a thin and light laptop, a premium machine sold by Huawei. It's one of their first laptops. Previously, they've had the MateBook X, D, and E series. This is the MateBook X Pro, which is the nicest and one of the most expensive to date. But it lives up to that price in a couple of interesting ways. So this sells for $1,200 and up. This is actually the $1,500 version that was loaned to me by Huawei to review. And the $1,200 version has the sort of specs that you might expect from a sort of entry-level 2018 flagship laptop. It has an Intel Core i5 quad-core 8th generation processor, 8 gigs of RAM, 256 gigabytes of storage. It does have a high-resolution display with a 3:2 aspect ratio, but it's overall general entry-level stuff. For $300 more, though, you get twice the memory and twice the storage. You get 16 gigs of RAM and 512 gigs of NVMe storage. You get a Core i7 processor, and you get NVIDIA MX150 graphics. So overall, for an extra $300, it becomes pretty competitive with other high-end devices, which with similar specs might sell for a substantially higher price. It's a thin and light machine that has very slim bezels around the screen, including on the top, so there's actually not room for a webcam. Instead, it's tucked into the keyboard. We'll get to that more in a minute. And it has a backlit keyboard, a nice wide touchpad, stereo up-facing speakers, but then more speakers down here on the bottom. So we've got a total of quad speakers. It's one of the louder sets of speakers and generally sounds pretty good that, compared to other things that I've tried in this size range. There's a fingerprint sensor built into the home button, and we've got 4 microphones down here for far-field voice detection for using Cortana. It's a relatively thin and light device with an all-metal design. It's about 3 pounds and about 0.6 inches thick. And if you look down here on the side, we've got not that many ports, really. There's a headset jack, USB Type-C, Thunderbolt, which is also USB Type-C, and you can charge the laptop from either of those ports. And on the other side, just a USB Type-A port. And that's pretty much it. So there's ventilation in the back here. At first glance, it might look fanless, but when you use it, you can definitely hear the fan, especially under heavy load. Now, since there's not room for full-size HDMI and other ports, we've actually got this adapter that came in the case with HDMI, VGA, another USB Type-C, and USB Type-A port. So you just plug that into either of the USB Type-C ports. If you need Ethernet, you're going to need a separate adapter, though, because that's not included. And as for the charger, again, it's a USB Type-C charger. Now, Huawei says you should be able to get 12 to 15 hours of battery life. In my tests, 7 or 8 hours seems a little bit more likely. That's enough to power through much of a work day, but it's not necessarily leave the charger at home territory, so it is something you might want to take with you. It depends on what you do with the laptop. I'm a pretty heavy user of Google Chrome. I know that Microsoft Edge is supposed to offer better battery life, so it sort of depends on a couple of things. I should note that we've got a touchscreen display here. It does wobble a little bit, and I think that's sort of one of the side effects of the fact that we've got a device that you can open with one finger. That would be difficult to do with a sturdier hinge. It does have a 3000 by 2000 pixel display with a 3:2 aspect ratio, and as I mentioned, we've got a fingerprint sensor here, which is so fast that basically pressing the power button can unlock the device. So let's go ahead and show you how that works again. I'm going to sign out. And log in. And I realized I did that with the fingerprint sensor out of range, so let's sign out one more time. And log in. So pretty fast, pretty efficient. Another thing that works pretty well is, hey Cortana. It might take a second to register. Hey Cortana. What movies are showing at Cinemark in Philadelphia on Tuesday?
Here are some movies playing at Cinemark theaters on Tuesday: Ocean's 8, Solo: A Star Wars Story, Deadpool 2, Adrift, Hereditary.
So voice detection works reasonably well. It should work across the room. I've got a relatively small office, so the most I've done is standing maybe 7 or 8 feet away and using it. But generally speaking, it works. As you noticed, it took a second after the computer loaded Windows to really get going, though. Another thing that is really pretty distinctive on this device is that camera button. So let me even try to angle this down a little bit. and zoom in so you can get a better look at the camera. Okay, it's a little bit blurry. So let's zoom out. So it's mechanical, and it's been said to work for thousands and thousands of presses. And if it stops working, then honestly, odds are you probably might not notice, because the thing is, it's interesting camera placement. Let's go ahead and load the camera application here, and you'll see that we sort of have this pointing upwards at me, even though I'm sitting kind of far away. Now if I was sitting close enough, then it would be even more up the nose in terms of the angles that you're going to get from this sort of camera. And if you wanted to type while using the camera, you're definitely going to get your hands in the shot. So it's not great placement, and it's not a particularly high quality camera, but Huawei, much like Dell, wanted to go with a very thin top bezel and figured they couldn't really get away with releasing a laptop that doesn't have a camera, particularly a high-end laptop. So it's something that you're going to need to use from time to time, and it's there, but if you really need a better camera or better camera placement, then you're probably going to want to invest in a USB camera or get a different laptop altogether. You'll notice that there's a little light here that lights up to show you when the camera is on, and if I close the application, then it turns off. Likewise, if we launch the camera app again and close it, we've got a little bit of extra privacy there because it's now pointed at the inside. You can take a picture, it's just going to be blank. So the camera actually might be active for all I can tell there. It's just that it's not recording anything. Likewise, there's actually a mic mute button built into the function keys, which is kind of a nice feature to have. So camera's on, mic is off, camera is on, and mic is on. Now I noticed that when I ran Ubuntu Linux on this computer, that mic toggle doesn't work, so you'd have to do that manually, but it is a nice feature to have. Speaking of the function keys, we do have sort of the usual suspects, including volume and brightness, the keyboard backlight key here. There's one special key here besides the mic mute, which is that the F10 key brings up this utility for PC Manager, and it allows you to check your hardware, manage your drivers, and do a couple of other things. That's pretty much it in terms of additional apps that are loaded on this device. It's basically a Windows Signature Edition device, which means that it runs Windows 10 with not much additional software, unless you count the NVIDIA utility, which is available on this particular model. And that's something you wouldn't get on the cheaper model that doesn't have NVIDIA graphics. In terms of overall performance, it's a pretty good performer. MX150 graphics is not super high-end, but it's better for gaming and certain tasks that require hardware-accelerated video playback than Intel UHD graphics. But for basic work, you know, web browsing, office document editing, and so forth, you don't necessarily need the extra discrete graphics. You can find benchmark results at Liliputing.com if you want more details. Now, since this does have 16 gigs of RAM and a quad-core processor, it handles multitasking really pretty nicely. So I'm going to just open up a couple of different applications here. Alright, so we're going to play a video, we're going to mute the device so you don't hear the video, we've got a video encoding, we've got GIMP running, and with all of that, we're still only using about 4 gigs of RAM out of 16 gigs. So overall, it's pretty powerful in terms of multitasking. Now, one thing that you might notice here is that it is a high-resolution display. I've got it set to about 175% scaling with Windows. out of the box, the default is going to be 200%, and what that means is that it's a little bit like having, instead of a 3000 by 2000 display, a little bit like having a 1500 by 1000 display. And that means that if you are the sort of person who likes to do a lot of split screen activities, sort of taking up half the screen with each, it's taller than a typical display but less wide, or maybe just as tall but less wide. And so that gives you a little bit less room for side-by-side windows, particularly if you're doing it at 200% scaling. So, for instance here, we don't get the multi-column view that you would normally get with Liliputing.com. But if I switch to 150% scaling, then we get the multi-column view, but everything's a little bit smaller. So you can sort of adjust it to whatever you find comfortable. Personally, I found that 175 is it's close to best of both worlds. We don't quite have enough room to get the full width view of Liliputing.com, and so some other applications and websites might have similar issues, but overall I can fit a lot on the screen so that I can use one window for writing and one window for researching, which is basically what I wind up doing a lot during my day as a blogger. So depending on your workloads, if you're the sort of person who does one window at a time, this computer really might be overkill for you anyway, at least the version with the top tier specs that we're looking at here. But I haven't run into too many difficulties with the unusual aspect ratio. Most of the applications that I use on a regular basis now handle high DPI screens pretty well, including GIMP recently, starting with version 2.10, started to handle it pretty well. That was sort of one of my pain points for a long time when editing images using that open source image editing application. I haven't done a lot with gaming, but I did run some gaming benchmarks, and it does perform a little bit better than some other Windows machines that I've used. And that's sort of the overview. So we've talked a little bit about battery life, we've talked a little bit about screen quality. Like I said, the screen wobbles a little bit, but it does handle touchscreen interactions here, so you can use your fingers to interact with it. It doesn't open quite as wide as some laptops. It's not a deal breaker for me, but it's something that I know some people do care about. And the last thing I guess I should mention is, like I said, there's ventilation deck here. The camera that I'm using right now, you're probably hearing a little bit of whining noise and a little bit of outdoor construction noise anyway, so you're not going to pick it up. But under heavy stress, you will definitely hear the fan. It's not the loudest laptop fan, but it's not the quietest by any means either. And because of the way that this is sort of indented in here, I've noticed it's a little bit of a dust trap, so it can be a little bit hard to keep clean from time to time. But I've also got 2 cats in the house, so there's a fair amount of dust that's going to be in this area anyway. The back has a sort of metal lid here. The Huawei logo is sort of different tone, so it can look black, or I'm having a hard time picking it up here, but we get a little bit of shine there because it's got a kind of mirrored logo or mirrored surface. There we go. So it's a nice little effect, and it's not super prominent, but overall it's a pretty nice laptop that I've enjoyed testing. One thing that I meant to point out here, let's see if we can get a good angle so you can see the backlit keys. So the backlit keys are either on or off. And there's no other settings. So if it's not really bright enough for you and you want brighter, well, not much you can do about that. It's basically on or off, and that's it. Another thing that I wanted to mention on the keyboard is that the function key has 2 purposes. One is, as I mentioned, you sort of hit that F3 to change the backlight, or you can hit function in F3. Or if you like it the other way around, so that instead of just doing this to adjust the screen brightness, if you want by the default to be that pressing F2 equals pressing F2, press that once until the light comes on, and now screen brightness does not change because it's triggering as F2. Took me a little while to get used to that because it is a little easy to change by accident, but overall it works pretty well. So that is the Huawei MateBook X Pro. It's a premium notebook with the starting price of $1,200. The sweet spot, believe it or not, is the more expensive model at $1,500, which is a better bargain. If you're going to spend at least $1,200, you might as well consider spending a little bit more for the higher end version. If you are interested in a machine with pretty good top-facing and bottom-facing speakers, a fast fingerprint sensor, high-resolution display, good viewing angles, thin and light design, and premium specifications. It also does a pretty good job running Ubuntu Linux, at least with the out-of-the-box experience. You can check out another video that I've posted showing that. And yeah, if you've got any questions or want more information, check out Liliputing.com for more details about the Huawei MateBook X Pro. This is Brad Linder with Liliputing.